Thank you. It's such an honor to be here back at TEFAF Talks again. We look forward to this every year. And this year is especially noteworthy because I'm joined by two incredible guests, Allison Berg and Carolyn Ramo. But just a quick comment first before we get started on what Dominique said. This vision of TEFAF, this expansive view of TEFAF as being more than just a fair, but a real kind of a leader in the arts community, and one that has a social obligation. And I think that's the perfect context for the conversation we're going to set up today, that the art world is not just about collecting, but it's also about collecting with purpose, and what we do as collectors and a member of this community to go beyond supporting the immediate ecosystem by participating in it in commercial enterprise, but what we're doing to serve artists and the broader art community. So as Dominique said, I'm Drew Watson. I lead art services at Bank of America. We are the art lending and advisory group within the bank. The bank is a very large sponsor of arts and culture in nonprofit space all around the world. And that's a way that we serve communities in which we operate. The business that I lead is the way that we serve our clients, who are collectors, families, endowments, institutions, et cetera. So it's such an honor to be with all of you today. Allison needs no introduction. She is a collector, a philanthropist, a board member of LACMA, and of course the founder of the A&L Berg Foundation. Carolyn Ramo is an old friend, arts administrator, really arts leader. I would really more define your role. Former director of Artadia, an incredible arts nonprofit that we've partnered with now for many years at Bank of America, and now currently the executive director of the A&L Berg Foundation. So thank you for joining us today, both of you. So let's go ahead and get started. I always love to start off these conversations. Every year we sit down, we have the privilege of sitting down with collectors and understanding how they started their collecting journey and where that took them. So I would love to start, either one of you feel free to jump in first, but I would love to start by asking, what were your journeys that first connected you to art? And how did that lead you to what you're doing now?
Go ahead.
I honestly was led to art. I'm laughing because I see many people here that were on the beginning of the journey when I was a baby collector. I always appreciated art, but I grew up in a world where I never even thought about collecting. I went to museums on school field trips, and it really wasn't until my younger adulthood that I started collecting art, appreciating art as objects to decorate our walls. And eventually we relocated from New York to LA, and I had been working with an art advisor at the time, and I asked her, I have such a busy life, how am I gonna stay in touch with art on a regular basis the same way I can in New York City, where it's kind of at my fingertips? And so the first thing you should do is start spending time at LACMA. And a transition started slowly happening from there. I started spending time with incredible curators and really came to a place of understanding and appreciating art as so much more than exclusively the objects that they are. I started learning from many different points of view about the narratives behind the art, and really start thinking about what forms the bridge from the maker with the idea for the art all the way to the audiences that were coming to view the art, and who were the audiences that were coming to see the art. And now, at this point, after being involved in so many different roles for a while, I'm now fascinated by what is the relevance of the spaces that are displaying the art. What's the relevance of museums now versus decades ago versus centuries ago? I think we're at a point of inflection, and how are we seeing art and the spaces that share art for the future, and who has access to that, who is involved with that? And that's kind of how we started the foundation and what got us here.
Fascinating. And Carolyn, I mean, you have a bit of a different journey, but there's some parallels in some really interesting ways because of your work. So much of collecting really focuses on the object, but a lot of your work has really gone beyond the object to really focus on the artist and also the institutions in the space. So maybe say a few quick words about your path.
Yeah, I would say that the through line for me has always been about artists.
Yeah.
I grew up in LA, I came to New York, I went to NYU, studied art history, and then worked at many a gallery, 3, but that's many, before Arcadia. And the through line for me, again, has been about artists. But working at galleries is really so much about the transaction, but it's also about nurturing a career at a very fast pace. And I was privileged to be able to work with some of the most extraordinary thinkers, became friends with a lot of artists. And so for me, collecting has really come from those relationships. And then the work that we do at the foundation and what I care about now is really about nurturing the individuals, not just artists, but those that are really shape our art world, our art ecosystem, to make sure that it is a lively, expansive, intriguing place that continues. So it's, of course, about the objects that are in these halls, but for me, it's about the maker first and foremost.
Exactly. So, I mean, thinking about this in the context of an art fair where, again, there is so much focus on the material, right, on the objects, and they're incredible in and of themselves, the objects, the stories, but often the maker is erased, right? Whether, you're considering them in a historical context or even in a more contemporary context. And then, thinking about the maker and thinking about the broader context that we're all operating within, it brings to mind that collecting is more than just, again, transactions, as you were putting it. It comes with real responsibilities that are embedded within that role. So how do you guys think about that role of being a collector? What does it mean to be a good collector, given those responsibilities?
Well, I would say first, of course, it's really thinking about the intention of what that object, the artist's intention with that object, and who is shepherding that in a way that you align with. But then also you have a responsibility when you are collecting. I mean, you're contributing to what the canon is. You're contributing to what art history's conversation is right now. So I think Allison and the way that she collects is a great example of that, with very conscientious, values aligned, not just about transactions, getting to know the people and what is the story behind the object, but what is the story that comes with, being the custodian of that object.
Absolutely. And does it, Allison, when you think about collecting, it's not only, about the being a steward of the object, but also for you, is it about being a supporter of the artist? And do you view that as almost in a way, a philanthropic act of itself?
I do, and sometimes it's a conundrum, right? Like, I've had debates with many collector professionals in the art world. If you need to know the artist and you need to know the story, if the art can't speak for itself, then is the art doing its job? And I just personally couldn't imagine separating the art from the artist. I am very much concerned with supporting artists, not just by acquiring their artwork, but also talking to them about their concerns in the world, their concerns for themselves. I mean, the fact that there's a marketplace for art is really quite a novel concept relative to the history of the world and when people started making these objects and what they were making them for. And I've spoken to a lot of artists, particularly those that are in their 80s, in their 90s, and they say, look, I survived on patronage. That's all there was. You had to hope that you could find a patron with the means to support your ideas, whether it is with their making of objects. Again, another topic for conversation. It's how our Artist Social Impact Grant evolved. There are now a lot of artists who have projects that benefit communities far beyond the art world. And we're interested in participating in that as well. Because at the end of the day, yes, artists are makers, but I think that most of them have a very special sensitivity to the concerns of human beings, of our culture, and they are entrepreneurial in a different way that we traditionally think of a business entrepreneur when it comes to the ideas they bring to the table. And so, that's how we get, I could go on and on, but Theaster Gates and his Stony Bank space and how he completely started the revitalization of Southside Chicago with his work, or Lauren Halsey, who was the first recipient of one of our Artist Social Impact grants, who is starting a community center in South Central to benefit and empower children coming out of that neighborhood, using art as a vehicle, but doing so much more than just teaching art or art making. Who had Derek Forjor with his camp. I can go on, and and there's some artists. I remember going. Actually, I'm looking at Neil. I remember going to a fairly Baez conversation back in the fall, and she said, "Oh, we're not changing artists aren't changing public policy, but we can contribute the ideas to help move that along." And I just think it's really important for collectors and lovers of art and lovers of artists to pay attention, listen, and support these projects in whatever way excites you.
Yeah, so you've clearly gone beyond, not to diminish collecting, but beyond just building a collection to really thinking critically about not only artists but also the field. And you've mentioned some of the grant making, et cetera, that you all have done. Maybe this is a good moment to really dive into the A&L Berg Foundation. Give us a little bit of background, or give us an overview of what you're trying to accomplish with the foundation and really how it came to be.
What our mission is to make sure, to the best of our ability, that we continue to expand the narratives that we see in the visual arts spaces in the United States. And when we first started the foundation, my first phone call was to Thelma Golden, and I said, "Look, I'm ready to do something, and we want it to be the most. I'm not Melinda Gates. We want this to be as impactful as it possibly can be." And I joked. I said, "I'm certain that nobody ever launches a foundation saying I want to waste stupid amounts of money on thoughtless things." But unfortunately, a lot of people look back and they realize that that's what they've been doing. And so, to the best of our ability, we wanted to really be thoughtful and intentional, and ask the professionals in the field and ask the artists, what is it that you need right now? What is it that the field needs right now?
What are the gaps?
And what are the gaps?
Yeah.
What are the gaps, and what is no one doing? And not with the intention of being unique and exceptional, but to not waste time and resources reinventing the wheel. If there's somebody filling the gap, we'll get behind them. To be redundant is just not. I don't think that that's the best use of time and resources. And then Thelma asked me, "Well, do you want to go wide, or do you want to go deep and narrow?" And there's no right answer to that. But for us, Larry and I decided we really wanted to go deep and narrow. And first and foremost, the people in the art world, the artists, we sort of have this a little confusing, but we have our private giving and the foundation, which it's kind of silly because it all comes from the same place, but it's a matter of the frameworks. And so we do a lot outside of the actual foundation with artists, with exhibitions and other situations. But for the foundation, we first and foremost wanted to do something for curators. It became apparent to us that nobody or very few people and entities were really supporting early stage curators and arts professionals. And I'm not talking about emerging. When we look at the statistics, there's a lot of support for emerging professionals in the arts. It's those that have been there for a few years and are now thinking about their career advancement, whether that means how to get a promotion within your institution, how to move on to the next larger space, how to fundraise within your institution, and there are a lot of people out there that find that problematic, that curators, for instance, are expected to fundraise, but it's the reality. And that's another thing too. We really believe in discussing and supporting the realities of the problems in the landscape, not the fantasy of the way we wish it were. So yeah, we launched the ESOP Fellowship as a response to probably 30 to 40 conversations with leaders that ranged from arts workers to curators to museum directors to many alumni of existing internships and fellowships.
I feel like Allison's a little selling herself short. She did 2 years of very intensive research, maybe longer, 5 years. I was lucky to join in support and to run the foundation alongside Allison because we really worked together. 2 years ago, the foundation started probably 2 years and 1 month ago. So it was perfect timing. But so just a little bit more about the fellowship. And I think just to kind of summarize some of what Allison was saying is that, if you want to see a more expansive arts ecosystem and you want your institutions to look different, you really have to support the individual. So, and as I've said, the through line for me were artists, but I love the conversations that I had with Allison very early on. If you support a curator who is going to create an opportunity for 50 artists, you are, ultimately supporting maybe 50 times the number of artists that you would just with an artist support grant. So the fellowship is a really important lane that we have chosen. We're now in our second year, and it's not teaching arts administrators how to do their job. It is instead expanding their networks, really giving some sort of soft relational skills, talking about the things that are uncomfortable, that are very much a part of our ecosystem and are necessary parts of doing your job. And then just some of the facts to back up what Allison said. I think 75% of arts workers, I just read this today from Museums Moving Forward, thank you very much for that data study, 75% of them make less than $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
So it is, and it takes 9 years to get a promotion. So it is a really tough road, and these incredible human beings have chosen the path to enrich our lives and enrich our institutions. So it is an incredible honor to be able to meet them where they are and provide a little bit more of a support base, a platform, validation, and resources as well that I think are important, and an international art conversation. A lot of it is about travel, giving opportunity. We bring fellows to Venice, to Sao Paulo for international exchange, so it's very exciting.
Right. Well, so I just want to dig into a couple of things that you said I think are really interesting. So one is, I think it's worth highlighting that the arts nonprofit field, if you think of the people leading the field, if you think of curators that are shaping our art historical dialogue, the canon, scholarship, et cetera, its compensation is low, opportunities are very few. Certainly to advance within organizations takes a lot of time. Not everybody can afford that, right? And so essentially what you guys are doing is increasing access to a wider array of individuals who can bring all different perspectives and backgrounds and talents into the field to be able to contribute to a more nuanced art historical discourse. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and it's the same thing with collecting, as I said. It's our responsibility to research what we're buying, what we're able to be the custodian of, and then it's the same kind of thing of who do we want to actually be those that are choosing the artworks that we get to experience, the exhibitions that are on view.
So let me ask my Barbara Walters question for you.
You're gonna make us cry.
Okay, no, well, maybe. I'll have to
Are you gonna make us in trouble with
the... You mentioned tough conversations. What are the tough conversations?
Oh, there are many. Generally speaking, they're the conversations that nobody teaches an arts professional in their academic world and nobody's comfortable to have in the workspace. It's conversations about class. There are a lot. The art world as a profession is really highly inaccessible to anybody who does not have other sources of income. And people just don't talk about it. And if you don't have those sources of income, it's really challenging and the networks and the connections to find the job. It's really important. It's really difficult to find the job. Then once you find the job, how are you really staying in that job, particularly in a city like New York, like LA, where you are not getting paid anything near the cost of living without getting another job that then is going to take away from your time and your productivity at your arts work job. And then how do you dress when you go to a dinner with a bunch of wealthy collectors? What can you expect the conversation to be? And how do you participate in that conversation if you've never experienced a lot of the life experience that some of these people are talking about at the dinner table? How do you fundraise when, as an arts professional, you are in an institution, you are expected to fundraise right now, if you are not comfortable talking about money, let alone talking to other people who may have different amounts of money than you? How do you ask for a raise and not seem entitled?
Or pushy.
Right. I'm trying to think.
I mean, I think.
How do you navigate? Sorry, one more. One of the most important ones, I think, in this time that we're in right now is how do you navigate between your own personal beliefs in the world and the responsibilities of your public-facing role?
Ooh,
that's a big one. So
that's
luckily, Allison and I bring in a lot of experts. It is not the two of us. So we are really lucky.
Yeah, how do you, to your point, how do you address some of these gaps? This is not what they teach you when you're getting your PhD in art history.
Yeah, right? I love teaching the fundraising course, but beyond that, we really look to a lot of experts in the field, those that have had experiences navigating a lot of these issues themselves. And have a very wide network ourselves. And so the idea is to both have an education, but then also create a network building opportunity while we have workshops. We have, again, these international trips. We work with an incredible firm called Verge that is literally a recruiting firm in the art world. And so we, again, have found these great partners.
So it seems like mentorship really plays an important role.
Absolutely. We also have a mentorship piece.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you a bit now about the structure of what you're doing. I mean, so when people are thinking, okay, I want to go out and affect certain change in the world. I've identified an issue that I'm passionate about. I want to do something about it. There's so many different ways of going about doing it. What are the opportunities and challenges of establishing and running your own foundation, starting something from scratch?
I feel like Allison can get into the nitty-gritty of that because you did ask yourself that question and then ultimately came into a course of action. But I will say that, it is incredible to see tons of collectors who have opted to create exhibition spaces. They're needed. Most museums in America, or at least I'll speak for America, started with a singular patron. And we need that. And there's certainly some financial advantages to doing that, advantages in terms of your collecting. But it's so wonderful to see what other opportunities there might be. I mean, certainly individuals can participate by being on boards of institutions, can, volunteer time or resources or wisdom. I can get into the W's, but there are all those
time,
things that are opportunities.
Talent, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And those things are really needed. But it is also, I think, an incredible opportunity to say, what are some gaps? And maybe if it's not even you, I mean, I would say, to Allison's credit, she was game to really do the work. And it is not, we are working every day to do this. It is not something that is easy. And yet, I think it is incredibly necessary, and anyone who kind of can find the partners, can find the programs that speak to what they're doing, I think there's an opportunity outside of just an exhibition space, and maybe a responsibility that we have to think of what are other ways to be philanthropic.
Why not plug into something existing? Why create your own?
So yeah.
Really good question. I really tried desperately to plug into something existing. I spent a lot of time with Michael Govan figuring out, because he's such a visionary, and we'd been supporting many of his visions at LACMA and beyond. We talked about partnering to do things. I investigated partnering. I'll put in a plug for Mark Godfrey and New Curators. There are a lot of really good programs out there. And I also I struggled with the idea of putting a dime toward anything. If we were starting our own foundation, putting a dime toward anything other than it going directly to the beneficiaries. But ultimately what happened is, again, as these years of research showed, is there really were no programs of scale that were supporting early stage arts professionals. So that was really what started it. And I spent a lot of time with a curator based in LA, Cesar Garcia Alvarez, who runs the Mistake Room. And he just one day said to me, Allison, you have been researching the hell out of this for years. Let's just take a group. Let's take a group of people from less resource backgrounds who are curators to the Venice Biennale. And that was sort of what sparked it. And in the meantime, Carolyn and I had been having, I forget, what was it, quarterly, monthly. Carolyn was still at Arcadia, and she was really, really resourceful when she went on maternity leave. She said to me, I want to keep having conversations with intelligent, insightful people, and she chose me as one of those people. On a regular basis, I want to make sure to stay informed and to stay relevant while I'm on maternity leave. And I went to her. She was the first person I called when I said, okay, I think I have the idea. We're going to take, we have a framework. It's going to back out of an international research trip to Venice, but I need an executive director. I can't, I'm doing this full time, which, by the way, I want to point out that we understand is a luxury. And part of what informed that was really soul searching. What am I in a unique circumstance to do in this lifetime? And I have the luxury of putting my time into this. But I said to Carolyn, I think I need to hire an executive director. I'm not feeling okay about it. Talk me off the ledge. And do you know of anybody? And she said, first of all, you need to listen to Dan Pallotta's 2013 TED Talk, and which the basis of that is philanthropy is a market for love. It is a marketplace, and we need to treat it as such. You should be built. We, as a civilization, should be building out not-for-profits with the same kind of thoughts, the same kind of intentions that we build out a for-profit business.
And to be really specific, to pay people the same amount of salary that they would get at a for-profit job, so that you're hiring incredible talent who then can steward your vision into something that, and again, I'm not speaking for myself, but can steward your vision into something that is effective, that is impactful. And I think that if we have strong talent and leadership in the arts, in nonprofits, that it will, they need to be run like businesses, like a for-profit business would be. So, sorry, keep going.
No, that's really important. And that really was, I think, the point of inflection that brought everything together. And Carolyn said, actually, I know of somebody. I think I could do this. And actually, and just to make the timetable clear, at that point, she had already left Arcadia many months before. And that too was a moment of hesitation. We were like, well, wait a minute. We're self-aware. We know how we present. Are the two of us the right people to be running this? Should we be working with individuals who, again, have navigated the same challenges as the beneficiaries of this program? And that is why we decided, yes, we're both available, we're both ready to do this, but we are going to surround ourselves with those people. And we feel very, very dedicated to authentically living that mission with every move we make. Everyone, we're small, it's just the two of us, and now Lerman, who came on board a few months ago as a program coordinator. Everybody, whether it's our program coordinator, our mentors, our advisors, our speakers at our workshops, the leaders in the ecosystem who host us when we do the international research trip. Everybody is compensated for their time, everybody. And everybody, we want to make sure that everybody we're bringing into this network are the people that we were intending to benefit from the get-go.
Yeah.
And just a little bit in terms of anyone here who's thinking about how do I start a foundation? Is this the right path for me? I think a little bit more of some of the research that you went into is, partnering with potentially a very large foundation or partnering with institutions. And again, as Allison said, there are other programs that are a little similar. But I think that the choice to do it on your own was not just about like a name and lights moment, although I appreciate that you have embraced your role as this philanthropist and as somebody that can inspire others. It's not ego-driven. It is very much about there's so much bureaucracy at some of these other places. The timeline would have been much slower.
You wanted to be able to move
And it's
quickly.
about I remember having that first call with Allison, which was July of 2022. And I started doing the math while I was talking to her and when Venice was. And I was like, oh my God, I have to start tomorrow.
She kept saying that for 2 weeks. She said, I can't start till September. I can't start till September.
And then I started that week.
She started the next day.
So just to say that, I think part of it is really looking at what is important in your life, what do you want to get done, what are the resources that are available, and we are really connected folks, and we are able to think about who ultimately might be a partner for us down the line. I mean, we're very much in startup mode, and we're excited about that and embracing the malleability and the flexibility that comes with being responsive in a startup mode. That said, I think it's important to say, do you have kind of all the elements it takes to run a business, or do you want to partner with a large foundation? Would it make sense to come in as something that you're just supporting one small program at an institution?
Right.
We were just at a luncheon for Studio Museum, and the education program they have there is a very specific lane, and it's so cool what they've been able to do. And you can find things that you could just support one thing and have a real impact that way. And choosing to have your own foundation and really doing the work is a commitment. It really is.
And I think, as much as we appreciate all the things that Carolyn's saying, in addition to being nimble and being responsive to whether it's a crisis like fire relief in LA, or when federal funding is pulled from our institutions, or whatever it might be, being independent gives you nice flexibility in that way. And also, I think what went into it, earlier you were talking about your role. I have to sort of tie an earlier thought into the current thought. When Carolyn talks about our network and our relationships, that was something important to me. As a collector, I had built these incredible, wonderful relationships with leaders in all parts of the ecosystem, whether it was the artists, the curators, the museum directors, the gallerists, and I had utilized those relationships in many ways up till now, whether it was as a journalist or for other patronage. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I uniquely situated to do in this lifetime that can really have an impact in the 5 minutes that I'm here? And I was like, wait a minute, I can utilize these relationships to help other people.
It's a valuable asset, and you can use it to help improve people's lives.
Yeah, and I think, and it goes into when we talk about all those tools aside from just, financial currency.
So you mentioned you're in startup mode. You've been around 2 years. Of course, you had the amazing New York Times kind of spotlight article that everybody, I'm sure, wrote you about back in the fall. But you've been able to accomplish quite a lot in your very short kind of lifetime as a foundation. So could you maybe share with us a little today, even some of the early success stories or kind of aha moments that you've had, so a door that you opened for one of your grantees or participants, evolution of somebody's kind of profile, some of the change, or very early change that you've already started to observe.
We've had one full year of a cohort of fellows. There's 6 fellows annually. We're in the middle of our second year and starting to plan our third. And I would say that, really one of the things, of course, that Alice and I have talked about is what are our long-term goals. I don't think that we'll be able to necessarily see this change that is part of our mission statement. Initially, it's not going to be in the first couple of years. So it's very exciting for us to be able to support these individuals in the meantime. And then hopefully in 5, 10, 15 years, we'll start to see this kind of sea change, which is we're going to be very small part of it, but we're going to be a part of it. But in this first year cohort, we've seen people get incredible new positions and have attributed the experience that they had with the fellowship to give them both the confidence, the network, the skills to assume that role. But we can't take credit for that role. That's them. They were the ones that did that. But we're just playing a part in sort of elevating their sense of self in this role, and then also making sure that they have the resources. I mean, one of our fellows recently, part of what they receive is an unrestricted grant. I can't say more about unrestricted funds. If you're able to give funds, please make sure that they're unrestricted. It allows that flexibility, it allows that trust. And so one of our recent fellows who has had the opportunity to participate in other programs said, nobody's given me money. And that's what I need. Like I have considerable expenses. This money is game changing. It gives me chills to think about that. But that for me, just that resource exchange is an important part of what we do.
Yeah, and I'd like to drive that home. We sort of, we looked at as the financial grant as being the least important thing we were doing of our 5 prongs, because we weren't giving hundreds of thousands of dollars. We felt ashamed that that we didn't appreciate how much a grant that doesn't have to be 6 figures does for a young arts professional that has very few resources. And we talk a lot about going back to the changes that we've noticed. We've put a lot of thought into evaluating the impact as we go along. We do a ton of surveys, and we are realistic. We understand data. I think in general, data is not nearly as valuable in the present for anything as it is when you look back at 5 years of data, 10 years of data, 20 years of data. That's when we're really going to see the difference that we made. And also in the arts, it's tricky because so much of the impact that we hope to be making is really, in our opinion, qualitative, and everybody so desperately wants to make it quantitative.
Right.
And it's a little difficult. Like, I don't know if you saw the Bill Gates article yesterday, how they decided to wind down their foundation, and he can very easily throw these numbers around now that they've been doing this for decades, that, for such and such a period, there were 20 million children dying in the world. Now, since we got involved, there are only 10 million children dying in the world. And I was thinking
that will double the next year now.
And now it's going to double again, but it's like, okay, you can quantify numbers like that. How are we going to really quantify the impact that we're making? And again, going into this with the research, I had so many conversations with people involved with organizations like the Mellon Fellowship for undergraduate curatorial professionals, and the Mellon Mays program, and we realized from the start, another thing that you really have to be certain of when you start, if you're going to be effective with your philanthropy, is what does impact mean to you? And again, no right or wrong answer, but you need to be in touch with what is the impact. And for us, the impact is for both the individuals involved and the ecosystem on the whole. So right now, it's almost impossible to see what the impact is going to be on the whole, because again, ultimately, it's about expanding the narratives, I think, and expanding the variety of professionals that are involved in an institution, choosing what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and having more, I think about the leaders whose ideas contributed to this. Christine Kim is in the room. How are we, Thelma Golden can't be the only one. How can we participate in creating more Christine Kims, Michael Govins, Sandra Jacksons? The list could go on and on, but it doesn't go on and on far enough when people want to hire a new development person. We can think of how many museums right now who can't find a development person. Development jobs pay really well in museums, yet there's nobody out there who's been given the skills to do the job with them. How many times in 2020 when people decided they wanted to hire differently and the qualified individuals weren't there? I know we're not supposed to be using the word pipeline, but darn it, I'm going to use it. There hasn't been enough intentional pipelines within the arts ecosystem, and we do have enough data from history to know how to do a better job with that. So the individuals, we can give you anecdotes hear that, oh, you know, somebody from our cohort got an amazing new position at a larger museum. Somebody from our cohort said that the international research trip alone was a game changer because it serendipitously placed her in a spot where she was with both her supervisor and an artist who she had a dream her whole adult life of doing a project with, and by the end of her 5 days in Venice, got a project greenlit at her museum. And it was because she was on that trip. We had individuals from the first cohort tell us that since patrons at their museums saw them at the right parties in Venice, they treat them totally differently. And now they're asking them more questions about their projects and how can they support them. So, you know, we have a lot of incredible anecdotes now, but I think we'll be able to see the real impact in, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, when we hope that more and more of these individuals are remaining in our art system, right, and are supporting each other, because a big part of the network is having your peers to support you and to have exchange of ideas with.
Right, right.
And just to add one other kind of macro way of thinking about it, you mentioned the New York Times and back to this platform and even a talk like this today. So thank you for giving us this platform. But you could say that cultural philanthropy has a massive PR problem. I mean, there is just, if you look at all the Giving USA reports, the cultural philanthropy has gone down and down every single year. And, you know, I would say that the house is on fire. Like, this is it. We are in crisis. We all know this. I don't need to say why and how. But it's been incredible to see, again, like what has happened in terms of relief for artists and the art community that lost their homes, and a lot of, you know, resources in LA in January, and then also to see what happened in COVID relief. So it's really exciting for us to be part of a conversation of what does philanthropy look like today, because everyone has the ability to rise to the occasion, I think, that are walking these halls buying this art. But this is the moment that we kind of say, like, what can we do that's a little bit more than just being able to have the ability to, again, purchase work, support artists, support the art world through that, and do a little bit more. So I would say that's a big thing of what we're also trying to do in a macro way.
In other words, there's so many different ways to be artist-driven in your philanthropy in the arts and culture space beyond simply supporting the gallery infrastructure.
Yeah, and please do it now.
And please do it now.
We need it. It's a crisis.
So we'll have to leave it there in the interest of time today. But we do have a few minutes for questions at the end if we have any. Oh, several hands have gone up. Yes.
A question to explain the review process or the vetting process for candidates. And could you clarify this, since you've targeted a particular group in the career ladder, are these recipients holding jobs when you give them a grant? So is this grant above their salary?
Those are two really good questions. I'll answer the second one first. Yes, all of the professionals that participate in the cohort already have a job. Again, informed by a lot of research and a lot of conversations. Internships are wonderful, but generally speaking, the field was sort of flooded with tons of internships that people were stepping out of jobs to do in certain circumstances, putting their education on hold to do. And then what was at the end of it? There were not enough jobs for the people doing all these wonderful internships. And we decided, both because of the area of greatest need and the reality that, you know what, let's choose a lane ourselves. We are not recruiters. We cannot promise people that we're gonna place them in a job. We don't wanna be the ones to take somebody off a career path or off an educational path, or not even off the path, just your time is your most valuable currency. We didn't wanna be people who took more time away and promised something at the end that maybe we couldn't come through on. So they do all have positions. So yes, the grant is on top of the money that they make. And then, what was the first question?
How they're chosen. Do you want me to summarize? So they are all chosen by nomination, and they're invited to apply. So it is a group of nominators that are usually like much further along in their field, that are tapped into different geographic networks. It's all US-based arts administrators. And I don't know if we actually spoke about this, but it started out being curators, but we've really expanded what your role might be. This year, our fellows are those that work in the kind of intersection between education and curation and really think about public programming. But as Allison mentioned, we're even thinking about like, who's doing development right now? Who's, really like kind of making these institutions run? Some people do work independently, but predominantly it's those that have chosen an institutional path. And then really, again, speaking to our long-term goal, like we're hoping that these are folks that have made an early commitment to their career path. So that way that ultimately they, hopefully with our support and with their own kind of hard work, that they continue on that career path so that we can see some change in the institutions that we're ultimately supporting through this work.
Yeah,
There was go ahead, please.
And then just to add one thing to that also, again, that goes back to the idea of investing in individuals and treating a not-for-profit like a for-profit business. Like, I was almost hesitant to say this aloud, 2 years ago when we were thinking about the program. But yes, when you're putting money towards supporting people, you're hedging your bets a little bit. And part of that decision was, these are people who are already anything can change any day, but these are people who are already committed to staying in the field, and that's who we want to get behind.
So I have a comment and then I have a question. So my comment is, I appreciated what you said about how difficult it is to quantify impact in the arts, but I think it is very interesting that you looked at curators as this node that can then reach out to like dozens or hundreds of artists beneath them. So I actually think from a quantitative standpoint, it's very interesting that that's the logic that informed which part of the ecosystem you want to sit in.
It's a bit of a force multiplier,
yeah.
Right?
My question is, how has your discourse been evolving just in light of the challenges that the arts ecosystem is currently facing, and what are you hearing from peer foundations and the responsibility of private philanthropy in this moment?
Thank you, Anna.
Good question, Anna.
Thanks a lot, Anna.
I think because this is being recorded, and I assume that people will be able to use a Google search to see what words I use right now, I probably can't answer that question in the way that I would like to. But just to say that I think, again, because we are in the early stages of thinking about what our program is and what this incredible foundation can and will be and is already right now, we're very much looking to others. Again, like we have a certain program, we have a certain mission, but I think that there are opportunities for us to kind of be more malleable, be more responsive. One of the things that we did this year was pivot some support that we had talked about for a specific grant and pivoted all to, like, for instance, LA fire relief to funds in Los Angeles. So that's just something that we're for artists. Yes, sorry. But we're also looking at, again, like, what is everyone else doing? It's very important for us to see, even just this week, you see so many people like Frankenthaler and Warhol and Mellon who have stepped up and provided support that when the government is not. So I think it's both sticking to what our lane can be, but then seeing what the potential is. I mean, the world's going to change so much in the next day, in the next week, in the next few months. So I think really important for us to just keep our ear to the ground and just see, let's stay the course, but let's see like what the constituents, the people that we're trying to serve, what are like arts professionals needing? And so we really kind of talk to them and get a sense from them, like how can this program best fit your needs? But in terms of a larger conversation about arts philanthropy, I mean, Allison sort of started touching upon this. I think we should look to artists, what they're supporting, how they're affecting their community. I mean, artists are going to make artwork whether or not we're participating in what's happening in these halls or not. So I think we look to them to say, like, what does this art world need to be? And then it's our job to kind of like rise to their occasion, see what artists can be in terms of philanthropists themselves. That is very important to me to think about. Like, we look a lot at those that have tons of resources and they're the ones that have the power, but maybe if we could try to say that like artists and their ideas are the power and then we kind of bring the resources around them. I'd like to see that as a potential different income stream, different way to approach the philanthropic moment so it's not our government that we're relying on. I really tried to carefully answer that. Hopefully that made sense.
Very well said.
I think that, the bottom line is, I think that philanthropy in the arts is more important now than ever. You can we're not going to go around and tell people what their values should be. But when you know, personally for me, and I think you would agree, Carolyn, when I think about my values, you know, I've been reading a lot of philosophers like Byung-Chul Han and Hannah Arendt, and you know, you think about what's more important, how long you live or the quality of life that you're living, and what's important to you, that you value people who are doing the work on this planet. And you know, and again, when I look at, you know, how much impact the Gateses have had on health and science, it's incredible. We need patrons and philanthropy in all these worlds. And even our own kids have said to us, oh, why do you put so much toward art? Like, if the climate's gonna like go bust in a minute, if we don't support climate change, like nobody's gonna be able to look at the art, or we're all gonna die. We can't look at the art. But you know what? You know, there's, thank goodness, as you know, science doesn't roll backward. The tools that get developed and invented don't roll backward. Unfortunately, behavior can roll backward, attitudes can roll backward, and democracy can roll backward. And I think that's what we're about.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, thank you so much for this session. I think we can clone you, or we should clone you. So it's truly important now or never. And by the way, not just young art administrators need this help, but someone like 35, although I'm forever 35, but I founded City Arts 35 years ago, and we still need that help. And if we, you know, it reminds me, in case of emergency, when you are on the plane, you need to put the mask on you first before you go and help someone else. So we, the arts administrators, really need that mask now or never to help our artists and to help the next generation of leaders, our youth that are working with our artists. So, you know, sometimes I get calls, oh, can we use your mural? It's so beautiful. And I said, okay, we have a copyright. How much can you pay? And they go, oh, we tapped off on the budget. When they come to art or artists, no budget anymore. So I said, we're not for profit, but we mean business. So I'm very much with you. Is there a way that you will create a special program between the two of you that will teach other foundations, corporations, and so on how to behave to not-for-profits, how to treat them, how to talk to them, how to invite them to work with them, and not just take them for granted as, oh, you're not for profit, so what do you care? You just use the public money and you go on.
Carolyn, you probably have some thoughts on this.
I just, I'm not sure that I can add another lane right now, but I think that's a very worthy suggestion. You know, I think ultimately we have to work in collaboration, and I think there's an opportunity in programs like what you are suggesting and other things where it's really about an education. I'm not sure that we need to be the educators, but I think there's an opportunity for us to lift up like where there might be some overlapping themes and concerns, and where we can kind of work more aligned to create these kind of conversations. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's a tough fundraising moment. So in terms of cloning Allison, I think hopefully what we're trying to get across today is that it's not, you can do it too. Like everyone can do it, you know? I mean, yes, it takes a certain amount of gumption, a certain amount of resources, but you know, I think if there's an interest in, you know, rising to the occasion, that we all need to kind of like message that out. I mean, again, I said that our cultural philanthropy has a PR problem, and that's really true. I mean, nobody understands, like even Allison's children, you know, are kind of like, why the arts? And that is, Like you would think like after COVID, where all we had was, TV and movies and art and, things that we could share with each other and express ourselves, that would have been the message that like that brings you livelihood and existence. So, we still have a real issue there, and I think that is the opportunity that we could amplify together. I really answered a different question.
So identify a gap, have a vision, treat it like a business. Any other kind of takeaways for people as they're thinking about what they want their approach to philanthropy in the arts to be?
Keep buying art.
Keep buying art.
We need it.
That's the perfect thing to end on today at TEFAF. Please join me in a round of applause. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Carolyn.